talk about what the connection between the black and brown people as far as what goes on out in California and Mexico. Either one of you ladies can take that.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that's very interesting is that being in San Diego, 15 minutes away from Mexico, when people hear me speaking Spanish, you know, they look at me and they stereotype me as African American because of my brown skin and broad features, full lips, and so they get shocked when they hear me speaking Spanish. Now, when I'm on the East
Yeah,
Coast,
he speak that
people will come
dímelo.
up to me and
Yeah,
speak Spanish, right?
that's
And
that
it's just
dímelo.
because those the numbers in terms of the African uh, population that was taken into Mexico during the Atlantic slave trade were fewer in number, and also because of the fact that Mexico is so large when you compare it to an island like Cuba or the Dominican Republic or Puerto Rico, the influence in terms of seeing that African visibility isn't as great when you look at a place like Mexico, and so many Mexicans aren't even aware of the African presence you know, through that legacy of slavery. But what most people don't know is that the African presence actually started before the slave trade. It wasn't until 1992 that the Mexican government officially recognized what they call the third root. The third root meaning that what makes the Mexican identity is the presence of Spanish, indigenous, and African being the third root. Again, that wasn't recognized until 1992. But
Now,
what I
now,
like
now
to call it is the
hold on there. When
sure.
you gotta like go back and slow down on that because that's not regular information. So
Mm.
reverse a little bit and say that all again because that's not information that's really taught.
So the piece around the Mexican government not recognizing that the African presence is a part of what constitutes the Mexican identity. One of my students once asked me, they said, so what were the Mexicans doing when, you know, the Spaniards came? And I said, well, there really was no such thing as a Mexican because before the indigenous people were here. And then the Spanish came, but when the Spanish came, they had already been ruled by Africans, by the African Moors for 800 years, nearly 800 years.
In
And even
Spain,
before that, Africans had come to the Americas before the Spanish and had mixed with the indigenous people and contributed to the Olmec civilization. So the whole concept of, you know, the African root beginning in slavery is a non-truth because the Africans had been mixing with the indigenous people and the Spanish before the Africans were kicked out of Spain in 1492. And, you know, for those historians or people who know history,
1492.
1492 is when the Spanish came over to colonize the New World, as they called it.
Okay. Wow. I
Uh,
take it that some people feel rubbed the wrong way when you say stuff like that.
Absolutely. And the reason why, and this is where the lecture becomes so significant, is that people feel rubbed the wrong way and turned off because of the way in which we're taught to perceive African and what that means. And because in our society and even around the world, African is stereotyped as something that's so negative and undesirable and inferior, who wants to be that? You know, and so
Dark.
really the discussion is about history, but it's also about colonialism and how internalized white supremacy has laid the foundation for the destruction of our societies, you know, around the world because we're taught to hate ourselves and we're taught not to learn how to see ourselves as one human family.
Well, I know many people felt that because of the African slave trade or Atlantic trade, as in certain parts of Texas we put in the curriculum, uh, have it that during the trade, not even the trade really, excuse me, but during the sale, a lot of them went to Veracruz
Right,
because there was ports there, like to alongside the coastal lines.
right,
So you have Belize, Costa Rica, definitely Panama due to the Panama Canal, uh, all the way down Guyana, Venezuela, you know, just along the coastal line, and of course, tips parts of Mexico. But people feel that is only towards the coastal line. So was this in the mainland and on the western part of Mexico as well?
Absolutely. The majority of the Africans, of course, were taken to the ports because of the boats docking there. But the reality is the Africans, if we're talking about colonialism, it was about profit. It was about economics. So they were taken to the interiors wherever a profit could be made. And so a lot of the African populations to this day are largely populated still in the coastal areas. But the reality is they're intermixed all throughout Latin America. The largest number of African descendants living outside of Africa live in Brazil. And when you understand the Atlantic slave trade and you see the routes, it's because of the close proximity of Brazil to the west coast of Africa. And so, when you look at the map, it all makes sense. But the Africans were taken literally all throughout. There's not a place in Latin America where Africans weren't taken.